Do you need to use ND filter with your DJI FPV drone? The answer is yes, and I'm going to explain you why. In the first part of the video, I'll talk to you about what we call the exposure triangle, then I'll give you some pros and cons, then at the end of the video, I'll give you some extra tips. To expose your image, you need three things: ISOs, shutter speed, and aperture. ISOs are artificial light. The higher they are, the more it's going to degrade your image, so you need to keep them as low as possible. The shutter speed is the amount of time your sensor will be exposed to light, and the aperture is fixed. One question I've not answered yet: what are ND filters good for? ND filters behave like sunglasses. They prevent the light to penetrate your sensor. In which context do you need to use those ND filters? If you fly during a sunny day like this one, if you don't put a ND filter on, your shutter speed will increase. You'll have no motion blur, and on top of that, your image could be overexposed. That's when ND filters comes in handy. Pros: for example, if you're like me and you shoot at 60 frames per second, your shutter speed needs to be the double. It's like you have your FPS, you need to double up your shutter speed. For example, if you shoot at 60 frames per second, your shutter speed needs to be at least at 1 out of 120 seconds. Consequences will be you'll have the right amount of motion blur and your image will not be overexposed. And on top of that, ND filters can protect your gimbal in case your drone crashes. I'm not saying it's going to protect it like 100%, but I think it can absorb a part of the shock. Cons: the problem with ND filters is, honestly, I would not advise you to set your drone in automatic when you use an ND filter, because the consequence to that is that if you do so, your the DJI FPV drone is not just going to modify your shutter speed, but it's going to increase ISOs as well. Consequence to that is that it's going to degrade your image and some noise will appear. Those fuel ND filters, as those are the one we're talking about, weigh 3 grams. They are easy to mount, but be careful when you do so, because the gimbal is very fragile. I don't know how we say that. So pay attention to the gimbal when you do so, because the gimbal spring is very sensitive, and there's not really something to hold it. So when I used to fly my drone, I was like, what if I press the return to home button, and what if these ND filters pops out? But it never happened to me so far, and on top of that, I never had no gimbal error message, so it's all good. When the ND filter is on, you lose a bit of camera angle. You cannot tilt the camera up or down to the maximum, but honestly, I never fly at those extreme angles, so it does not bother me. You cannot have the ND filter on the gimbal at the same time as the camera gimbal protection. So final advice is expose for highlights. When you put your ND filter on, just make sure highlights are not blown out. I would use the ND4 when it's cloudy, ND16 in between, during the morning or during the afternoon, and ND16 would be as we shoot at 60 frames per second. I would use it during midday, when you have a harsh midday. So that's all I have for today. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope this has been helpful to you. I'm going to fly now. Enough talking. Cheers.